The air was thick with the scent of pine and sweat at Fort Benning, Georgia, where Major Tara Hensley stood on the edge of a dusty training field, her heart pounding with a pride she hadn't felt in years. At 38, a single mother from Nebraska, Tara had carved a place for herself in the Army, a world that demanded every ounce of her grit. But today, under the oppressive southern sun, that pride was a fragile flame, flickering against a storm she didn't yet see coming. Her son, 11-year-old Caleb, was her anchor, his wide-eyed stories about mom soldiers, the bridge between her two worlds. She'd built something extraordinary here, a training program called the Crucible, a brutal, transformative exercise that turned raw recruits into a tight-knit unit of future leaders. Her cadets moved with precision, their hand signals sharp, their trust in each other palpable. Tara had poured her soul into them, spending late nights mapping routes, buying better gear with her own money, and cooking her famous cornbread stew to feed their weary spirits after grueling weekends. This was her calling, her proof that competence could outshine any prejudice. But as she watched her cadets, a shadow loomed. Colonel Gideon Warwick, a Silver Spoon officer with a legacy as old as the Army itself, was watching too, his eyes cold and calculating. Tara didn't know it yet, but Warwick had already set his sights on her success, not to celebrate it, but to claim it. His boots crunched deliberately behind her, a sound that sent a chill down her spine. He didn't call her to his office. No, this was a public stage, a corner of the field where her cadets could witness her unraveling. "Major Hensley," he began, his voice a blade wrapped in silk, "your focus seems divided. A single mother can't juggle a child in command. The Army needs warriors, not part-time parents." The words hit like a grenade, shredding her pride. He used Caleb, her light, her reason, to wound her, dangling a manila folder stamped relief for cause. Her hand trembled as she took it, the red ink a death knell for her career. Behind Warwick, Captain Lyle Kessler smirked, his smugness a silent confession of complicity. This wasn't just a demotion. It was a betrayal, a meticulously planned execution of her legacy. Tara's world tilted, the cicadas' hum fading into a roar of silence. She'd given everything, 12 years of service, sleepless nights, her own savings, to build this unit, only to have it stripped away by a man who saw her ambition as a threat. But Warwick had miscalculated. He'd forgotten that a mother with nothing left to lose is a force of nature. As Tara walked off that field, her spine straight, her face a mask of resolve, a fire kindled inside her. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a fight she'd wage with every ounce of her cunning. If you've ever felt your hard work erased, your worth questioned, hit that like button, drop a broken heart in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe for stories that ignite your strength, because Tara's battle is just starting, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. The drive back to her modest Columbus apartment was a blur, the folder a toxic weight on the passenger seat. Tara's Jeep Cherokee baked in the Georgia heat, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. She didn't cry, her shock was too raw, her anger too sharp. Warwick's words echoed, "Part-time parent." They weren't just an insult, they were a declaration of war. She thought of Caleb, his gap-toothed grin as he asked about her future generals. She'd built the Crucible for them, for him, to show that leadership wasn't about rank but heart. 2 years ago, when she arrived at Fort Benning, the battalion was a shadow of its potential, middling scores, low morale. Tara changed that. Her Crucible pushed cadets to their limits, teaching them not just tactics but resilience. She'd spent her own money on night vision goggles, stayed up crafting training plans while Caleb slept, and fed her team steaming bowls of stew to remind them they were family. In 2 years, her battalion soared to the top 5% nationally, producing leaders who shone at Fort Knox. But Warwick saw her success as a prize to steal, not a victory to share. His rebranding of her program as Warwick's Gauntlet was the first blow, a slick PowerPoint slide erasing her name. Now this public humiliation was his checkmate, or so he thought. As Tara parked, the ghost of Kessler's smirk burned in her mind. She wasn't just fighting for her career anymore. She was fighting for her son, her cadets, and every officer who'd been silenced by a system that rewarded politics over honor. Tonight she'd start planning. Tomorrow she'd strike back. The glittering chandeliers of the Columbus Convention Center cast a warm glow over the 7th Brigade's annual military ball, a night of polished brass and crisp uniforms. Major Tara Hensley should have been there, her chest adorned with ribbons earned through sweat and sacrifice. Instead, she sat alone in a sterile office at Fort Benning, the hum of fluorescent lights her only company, assigned to a pointless duty as battalion duty officer, a task so beneath her rank it was a deliberate slap. The radio crackled with a college football game, but Tara's mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment Colonel Gideon Warwick stole her spotlight. Her program, the Crucible, had transformed the battalion into a powerhouse, its metrics climbing to the top 5% nationally. Those numbers, graduation rates, fitness scores, distinguished graduates, were her blood and soul, forged through late nights hunched over maps and cooking cornbread stew for her cadets. Yet tonight Warwick would claim it all. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sergeant Amos Tate, a loyal non-com at the ball. "Ma'am, Warwick's accepting the Leader of the Year award." He's talking up Warwick's gauntlet like he built it. Standing ovation. "Your name wasn't mentioned." The words sliced deeper than any blade, her contributions erased in a single speech. Tara stared at the empty parking lot outside, feeling like a ghost in her own story. Warwick's theft wasn't sudden, it was a calculated campaign. When he arrived a year ago, his polished East Coast pedigree and family name preceded him. He saw Tara's success not as a triumph but as a threat to his legacy. His first move was subtle, a battalion-wide meeting where he unveiled Warwick's gauntlet, her crucible rebranded with his name on a glossy slide. He held private mentorship sessions with her top cadets, planting seeds that he was the visionary, Tara merely a worker bee. The camaraderie she built soured into tension, her reports buried in red tape while Warwick's public praise rang hollow. "Major Hensley is a vital asset," he'd say, his smile never reaching his eyes. Each move was a chess play, positioning her as expendable. The ball was the culmination, a public coronation of his stolen glory while Tara was sidelined, babysitting an empty building. The injustice burned, a slow acid in her veins. She wasn't just losing credit, she was losing her place in the world she'd fought to belong to. But something stirred in that quiet office, a flicker of defiance. Tara's father, a Vietnam-era Marine, once told her, "Never let a thief walk away with your honor." Warwick thought he'd won, but he'd underestimated her. She opened her laptop, her fingers trembling not with fear but with purpose. A new folder appeared on her desktop. Reckoning. This wasn't about saving her job anymore. It was about exposing a lie. The text from Amos was a spark, igniting a plan she hadn't fully formed yet. She'd need evidence, allies, and a strategy to turn Warwick's game against him. The military ball wasn't just a theft. It was a gauntlet thrown at her feet. As the radio droned, Tara began typing notes, her mind racing. Somewhere out there, Warwick was basking in applause for her work, but she was already plotting her counterstrike. The next move was hers, and it would be surgical. The sting of that night lingered, a wound that connected to the larger war Warwick had waged. He hadn't just stolen her program. He'd weaponized the system against her, exploiting her role as a single mother to paint her as unfit. But Tara was no stranger to fighting uphill battles. Raised in a small Nebraska town, she clawed her way into the army, earning her place in a world that often dismissed women like her. The Crucible was her proof, a testament to her ability to lead, to inspire. She'd spent her own money on gear, cooked for her cadets, and stayed up late to mentor them, not for medals but for their growth. Seeing their tired smiles over her stew was worth more than any award. Now Warwick had turned that sacred bond into a tool for her destruction. But as she sat in that office, the weight of his betrayal began to shift into something else, resolve. She remembered a cadet she'd mentored, Ellie Pruitt, whose quiet strength mirrored her own. Ellie was competing in the upcoming Ranger Summit, a grueling test of skill and teamwork. Tara had poured her heart into preparing her team, believing the field was where truth won out. Little did she know, Warwick was already planning his next move, one that would test her like never before. The Georgia dawn broke over Fort Benning's rugged terrain, casting long shadows across the Ranger Summit course, where Major Tara Hensley stood, her heart a mix of pride and unease. Her team of 10 cadets, handpicked for their grit and hunger, moved like a single organism, ropes taut, boots steady, eyes sharp with trust she'd forged through months of relentless training. The summit was her arena, a brutal test of teamwork and skill where politics were supposed to burn away, leaving only merit. Tara had drilled her cadets for weeks, running hills until their lungs screamed, practicing one-rope bridges in the dark, and perfecting medical evacuations until they were second nature. Ellie Pruitt, a quiet but fierce cadet, was her anchor, a young woman Tara had tutored through navigation exams, seeing in her the same fire that had driven her own rise. They were neck and neck with a rival team from Fort Stewart, the air electric with tension. But as Tara watched, a prickle of dread crept up her spine. Colonel Gideon Warwick and his shadow, Captain Lyle Kessler, stood at the course's edge, their presence too deliberate, their eyes too hungry. The final event, the one-rope bridge, was high stakes. A test of precision where a single misstep could tank the team. Tara's cadets started strong, their movements fluid, the rope steady across the ravine. Ellie led, her focus razor-sharp. Then halfway across, Ellie faltered, not a natural slip, but an exaggerated stumble, her arms flailing theatrically. The rope shook violently, nearly throwing the cadet behind her. Tara's blood froze. It's a setup. Warwick's whistle pierced the air, halting the competition. He stormed over, his face a mask of staged outrage. "This is a safety disaster," he bellowed, loud enough for every cadet and instructor to hear. "Major Hensley, your negligence is unacceptable." He turned to the crowd, playing the righteous commander. "This event is terminated due to gross oversight." The words were a public execution, each one a nail in Tara's career. Kessler's smirk, oily and triumphant, was the salt in the wound, confirming this was no accident but a choreographed ambush. Warwick wasn't done. He turned to Ellie, his hand on her shoulder, voice dripping with false concern. "Cadet Pruitt, did Major Hensley provide adequate safety training for this obstacle?" The question was a trap, and Tara's heart stopped as she locked eyes with Ellie. She'd saved Ellie's academic career, believed in her potential, poured hours into her growth. Ellie's gaze darted away, her voice a whisper. "Sir, maybe we weren't as prepared as we should have been." A lie thin and brittle, but it shattered Tara's world. The other 9 cadets stood silent, heads bowed, their loyalty crumbling under fear. The betrayal wasn't just Ellie's, it was the team's silence, a deafening void where trust once lived. Tara felt the eyes of the entire course on her, shock and pity mingling in their stares. Warwick's voice cut through again, stripping her of command on the spot. "Major Hensley, you're relieved from this event." The humiliation was absolute, a blade twisted by Kessler's smug nod. Tara stood frozen, the world spinning, her pride incinerated. This wasn't just a loss. It was a theft of everything she'd built. But as she walked off the course, something shifted. The pain of betrayal, raw and searing, began to harden into clarity. Warwick thought he'd broken her, but he'd only awakened a deeper fight. In her Jeep later, the folder of her relief for cause report sat heavy beside her, but her mind was already turning. Ellie's lie, the team's silence, Warwick's orchestration. They were pieces of a puzzle she'd solve. She thought of Caleb, asleep in their Columbus apartment, his innocent questions about her soldiers. For him, she couldn't surrender. As the sun dipped low, casting the training field in fiery orange, Tara's resolve took shape. Warwick had staged his spectacle, but she was already planning her counterattack. A battle fought not with shouts but with evidence. The Ranger Summit wasn't the end. It was the spark that would ignite her war. The Columbus Starbucks buzzed with morning chatter, but the air around Major Tara Hensley felt heavy, charged with a tension only she could sense. She'd come at Colonel Gideon Warwick's invitation, a text that arrived after the Ranger Summit disaster, cloaked in false civility. "Coffee on me, Major. Let's discuss your transition." 9 a.m. Figueroa St. A flicker of naive hope had crept in. Maybe Warwick felt a pang of guilt. Maybe this was a chance to salvage her career. But as Tara stepped into the crowded shop, the sight of Warwick in a pressed polo, sipping a latte with a relaxed smile, snuffed out that hope. His eyes gleamed with calculation, not remorse. Tara ordered a black coffee, its bitterness a shield for what was coming. She sat, her posture rigid, as Warwick leaned forward, his voice a syrupy drawl. "Tara, thanks for coming. I know this has been tough, but I'm doing this for your good." The words were a prelude to a blow, and she braced herself, her grip tightening on the cup. "Think about it," Warwick continued, his tone patronizing as if explaining to a child. A post in Fort Irwin, quiet, predictable hours. No more late nights or field exercises. More time for Caleb, right? That's what a mother needs. The mention of her son's name was a gut punch, his casual sexism dressed up as concern. He wasn't offering a lifeline. He was painting her demotion as a gift, reducing her 12 years of service to part-time parent. Tara's vision blurred with rage, but she stayed silent, letting him weave his web. "Accept this gracefully, and I'll write you a glowing recommendation," he said, his smile fatherly but cold. "Make it difficult, file an appeal, make noise, and things get messy. Investigations are brutal, Tara. Stressful. For you and Caleb." The threat landed like a missile, her son now a hostage in his game. Warwick leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. "You don't want him seeing his mom fall apart, do you?" The world stopped. The clatter of cups, the hum of the espresso machine, it all faded. Warwick had crossed a sacred line, weaponizing her love for Caleb to silence her. Tara's heart thundered, but her face remained a mask, honed by years in a man's world. Inside something snapped, not with despair but with a cold, searing clarity. Warwick wasn't a commander. He was a predator, hiding behind rank to crush her spirit. Her coffee cup hit the table with a deliberate click, the sound cutting through his smugness. "Thank you for your concern, Colonel," she said, her voice steady, a shard of ice. "I'll consider your offer." She stood, turned, and walked out, the glass door swinging shut behind her, severing his false victory. The Georgia sun blazed outside, but Tara's mind was already elsewhere, plotting a war he'd never see coming. As she slid into her Jeep, the folder of her relief for cause report glared from the passenger seat, but it was Warwick's threat that echoed, fueling her resolve. She pulled out her phone, scrolling past dozens of contacts to find the one she needed. Captain Nora Finch, her rock from officer candidate school, now stationed at Fort Campbell. Nora answered on the second ring, her voice sharp with worry. "Tara, what's wrong?" Tara's response was calm, lethal. "Nora, it's me. Warwick just threatened Caleb to keep me quiet. Set up a call with General Holt. Now." The line went silent for a moment. Then Nora's voice came back, fierce. "I'm on it." As Tara drove toward the Chattahoochee River, the open water calling her to think, she knew this wasn't just about her career anymore. It was about protecting her son, her honor, and every officer Warwick might target next. The river's steady flow mirrored her growing resolve. She'd need evidence, allies, and a plan to dismantle his lies. Warwick thought he'd cowed her, but he'd only unleashed a mother's fury, a force that would shake his world to its core. The Chattahoochee River glinted under the Georgia sun as Major Tara Hensley stood on its banks, her phone still warm from her call to Captain Nora Finch. Warwick's threat against her son Caleb had turned her shock into a cold, calculated fury. She wasn't just fighting for her career anymore. She was fighting for her boy, her honor, and the truth. Back in her Columbus apartment, Tara transformed her small living room into a war room. The coffee table became her command center, stacked with training logs, emails, and a new encrypted hard drive labeled Reckoning. Fueled by black coffee and a burning resolve, she worked through the night, her laptop's glow casting shadows as Caleb slept down the hall. Every document was a weapon, every email a potential clue. Warwick had underestimated her, but Tara was no stranger to battles. She'd risen from a Nebraska farm girl to a decorated officer, and she knew the Army's first rule: a plan is only as good as its intelligence. She needed evidence, hard, undeniable proof, to expose his conspiracy. Tara sifted through 3 years of records, her eyes scanning for discrepancies. She found the original logistics request for the Crucible, her name clear as its creator, buried under Warwick's rebrand. Training schedules showed hundreds of hours of safety drills, contradicting his negligence claim at the Ranger Summit. But she needed more, a smoking gun. She made careful calls, not begging for help but seeking facts. To a former supply sergeant in Alabama, she asked, who requested the name change for the FTX program in 23? His answer was swift. "Warwick, ma'am. Your name was on the original forms." Another piece clicked into place. She called Colonel Ezra Holt, her old mentor from Fort Riley, laying out the sabotage clinically. His gravelly voice promised, "I'll make calls, Tara. The old guard needs to know." Her final call was to a JAG Corps lawyer, Major Lila Conway, whose sharp advice was clear. Focus on misconduct, not feelings. The best paper trail wins. Tara's reckoning file grew, each entry time-stamped, cross-referenced, a digital fortress of truth. Late Sunday night, blurry-eyed but unyielding, Tara struck gold. Buried in an archived email chain from Captain Lyle Kessler, marked Weekly Update, was a reply all Warwick thought she'd never see. Her pulse quickened as she read Warwick's directive to Kessler. Monitor Hensley's team closely. Log any unconventional methods. We need a recklessness pattern. Discreet. It was a premeditated plot, not a reaction to a mistake. Deeper in the chain, another email from Warwick to a fellow colonel was worse. This Nebraska farm girl's too ambitious for her own good. Women like her stir trouble. Time to clean house. The words burned Tara's gender, her drive weaponized against her. This wasn't just sabotage, it was discrimination, raw and ugly. She saved the chain as a password-protected PDF, her hand steady despite the rage. This was her Excalibur, a blade to cut through Warwick's lies. As dawn broke, Tara leaned back, exhaustion warring with a newfound confidence. Her reckoning file was a masterpiece. Emails, logs, witness accounts, and that damning email chain. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a strategist with an arsenal. Nora's call came at 6 a.m., her voice electric. General Holt's ready. VTC tomorrow with Major General Vernon Pike, Warwick's boss. You've got one shot, Tara. Tara nodded, staring at Caleb's dinosaur nightlight glowing down the hall. This wasn't just her fight. It was for every officer who'd been silenced, for every cadet she'd mentored, for the mother she refused to let Warwick diminish. She opened a new email to General Pike. Subject line, urgent. Command climate issues, Fort Benning. Her finger hovered over send, her heart steady. This was her declaration of war, and Warwick would never see it coming. As the river outside flowed on relentless, Tara clicked send, her resolve a quiet storm ready to break. The screen flickered to life in Tara Hensley's dimly lit Columbus apartment, her class A uniform pressed to perfection, ribbons aligned like silent testaments to her 12 years of service. The virtual teleconference with Major General Vernon Pike, Colonel Gideon Warwick's commanding officer, was her battlefield now. Tara's heart thumped, but her face was a fortress, calm, unyielding, forged by years of proving herself in a world that often doubted her. On the monitor, Pike's stern face filled one window, his eyes sharp with authority. In another, Warwick and Captain Lyle Kessler sat in their Fort Benning office, exuding confidence, their smug smiles betraying their belief that this was a formality to seal Tara's fate. They didn't know she'd spent 48 hours building an arsenal in her reckoning file. A digital dagger aimed at their lies. The air was thick with anticipation, like the calm before a storm. Tara adjusted her camera, took a sip of water, and prepared to strike. Major Hensley, Pike's voice boomed. You've requested this meeting. Proceed. Tara's voice was steady, a blade wrapped in velvet. General, I'm here to ensure decisions are based on truth. With your permission, I'd like to share my screen. A flicker of annoyance crossed Warwick's face, but Pike nodded. Go ahead, Major. Tara clicked, and a single PowerPoint slide filled the screen, stark and devastating. Fort Benning Battalion. Key events and discrepancies. 3 columns laid bare the war Warwick had waged against her. Column 1, she began, her tone that of an intelligence officer briefing a critical mission, details key events over the last 18 months, the creation of the Crucible in July 2023, my training program, and the Ranger Summit in April this year. She paused, letting the weight settle. Column 2 shows Colonel Warwick's official reports, claiming Warwick's gauntlet as his initiative and citing a safety failure at the summit due to my alleged negligence. Warwick shifted, his ruddy cheeks paling. Kessler's eyes darted nervously. Tara clicked again, revealing column 3. This, General, is the supporting documentation. Hyperlink by hyperlink, she unveiled her evidence. The original Crucible logistics request with her name, overwritten by Warwick's rebrand, training schedules proving exhaustive safety drills, and then the killing blow, an email chain from Warwick to Kessler. This directive, Tara said, her voice dropping to ice, orders Captain Kessler to fabricate a recklessness pattern against my team. The screen glowed with Warwick's words. Monitor Hensley closely. We need a recklessness pattern. Discreet. The virtual room went silent, the weight of betrayal palpable. But Tara wasn't done. She clicked one final link, her voice steady as steel. And this email from Colonel Warwick to a colleague reads, "This Nebraska farm girl's too ambitious. Women like her stir trouble. Time to clean house." The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of Tara's laptop. Warwick's face was a gray mask of panic, his confidence crumbling. Kessler stared at his hands, sweat beading on his temple. Tara stopped sharing her screen, her face reappearing, calm and resolute. She'd laid her ambush, every fact a bullet, every document a landmine. Pike's granite-like expression didn't waver, but his eyes burned with something new, fury, directed not at her but at the men across from him. "Colonel Warwick, Captain Kessler," Pike said, his voice low and lethal. "You will remain on this call. Major Hensley, you're dismissed. We'll be in touch." The screen went black and Tara exhaled, the weight of her fight settling into a strange, hollow calm. She'd turned Warwick's game against him, but the cost of the battle lingered. As she folded her uniform jacket, her mind drifted to Caleb, asleep under his dinosaur nightlight. This wasn't just her victory. It was a beacon for every officer facing a system rigged against them. The war was over, but the real question loomed. What would justice look like? The Columbus apartment was quiet, the last echoes of the virtual teleconference fading as Major Tara Hensley closed her laptop. The screen's black reflection showed her weary face, but beneath the exhaustion burned a quiet triumph. She'd exposed Colonel Gideon Warwick's lies with surgical precision, her reckoning file a devastating weapon that left him and Captain Lyle Kessler reeling. Yet, as she folded her class A uniform, the victory felt heavy, like a wound cauterized but still raw. Tara walked to Caleb's room, watching his chest rise and fall under the glow of his dinosaur nightlight. For him she'd fought, not just for her career, but for a world where honor could prevail. The Georgia night was still, but Tara's mind churned. General Vernon Pike's final words, "We'll be in touch," hung like a promise or a warning. She didn't know what came next, but she knew she'd changed the game. As dawn broke, a call from Captain Nora Finch confirmed it. "Tara, Pike's launching an investigation. Warwick's on thin ice. And General Holt wants you at Fort Campbell." Fort Campbell, Kentucky was a new chapter, a rolling green expanse far from Fort Benning's oppressive heat. Tara arrived as Major Hensley, promoted below the zone, a rare honor that marked her as exceptional. Her new role leading the Future Leaders Initiative was a dream realized, a chance to shape officers with integrity, not politics. Her office overlooked vast training fields, where she crafted programs that echoed the Crucible's grit, but carried her name proudly. Here, she wasn't a problem to be managed. She was a standard-bearer. The Army's trust in her was a balm, healing the scars Warwick had left. A month later, Nora sent a brief email. "Warwick's out. Forced retirement. Kessler's headed to a logistics post in North Dakota. Slow justice, but it's done." Tara read it, expecting a surge of triumph, but felt only closure, like finishing a book she'd already outgrown. Her focus was forward, on her cadets, her mission, and Caleb. Her new home, a cozy house with a wraparound porch in Clarksville, Tennessee, felt like a promise kept. Afternoons were spent watching Caleb kick a soccer ball with neighborhood kids, his laughter a melody that grounded her. The agonizing choice Warwick had weaponized, mother or officer, was a lie. At Fort Campbell, Tara found balance, leading with the same fire she brought to parenting. She'd cook her cornbread stew for her new team, their tired smiles mirroring those of her old cadets. One evening, as she helped Caleb with his science homework, she realized she'd rebuilt what Warwick tried to destroy, a life where she could be both Major Hensley and mom. The system hadn't broken her. It had bent to her will. But as she tucked Caleb in, a question lingered. Had her fight changed more than her own path? That question found its answer in a quiet moment weeks later, when Tara's phone buzzed with a Kentucky area code. It was Colonel Ezra Holt, her old mentor. "Tara, your work at Benning caught Pike's eye before Warwick's mess. Your metrics, graduation rates, fitness scores were unmatched. The initiative is yours because of that, not pity." His words were a lifeline, proof her labor hadn't vanished. Tara stood on her porch, the Tennessee hills glowing under a crimson sunset, and felt a weight lift. Warwick's downfall was justice, but her promotion, her new life, was redemption. She wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, building a legacy on her terms. As Caleb's soccer ball rolled across the lawn, Tara smiled, knowing her fight had been for more than herself. The real victory was still unfolding, a ripple effect she couldn't yet see, waiting to touch lives beyond her own. The Tennessee sunset painted the Clarksville sky in hues of amber and violet as Major Tara Hensley stood on her porch, the soft creak of the swing grounding her in this new life. Fort Campbell had become her sanctuary, where she led the Future Leaders Initiative with a fire that Warwick's betrayal couldn't extinguish. Her promotion to major, earned below the zone, was a badge of her resilience, but the real reward was the balance she'd found, leading soldiers by day, cheering Caleb's soccer games by evening. Her cozy home, with its wraparound porch and Caleb's laughter echoing from the yard, was proof she'd shattered the false choice between officer and mother. Yet, as she sipped coffee watching the hills, a quiet question lingered. Had her fight at Fort Benning left a mark beyond her own redemption? The answer came unexpectedly, in a phone call that would redefine her victory. Her phone buzzed, a Georgia area code flashing. "Major Hensley, this is Captain Wren Adler," a young, earnest voice said. "I'm an instructor at Fort Benning now. You don't know me, but your story does." Tara's breath caught, the name stirring memories of betrayal, but Wren's tone was different, reverent. "After the investigation into Colonel Warwick, things came to light. Your fight. It's a legend here, especially for us female officers. You gave us courage to speak up, to demand respect. The command climate's changing because of you." Wren's voice trembled with gratitude. "You fought for people you'll never meet, and I just thank you." Tara stood frozen, the phone heavy in her hand. She hadn't just won a battle, she'd sparked a movement. Her pain, her reckoning file, had become a shield for others, a beacon lighting the way for those silenced by men like Warwick. The call ended and Tara walked to the edge of her porch, the evening air crisp with the scent of damp earth. Caleb's soccer ball rolled across the lawn, his gap-toothed grin catching the last light. She smiled, a warmth spreading through her that wasn't just relief but purpose. Warwick's forced retirement and Kessler's North Dakota exile were justice, but this ripple effect was her true revenge. She'd built a world where ambition like hers, a woman's ambition, wasn't a threat but a standard. Her story had become a legend, not because she'd crushed her enemies, but because she'd lifted others up. The Crucible, her late nights, her cornbread stew, they lived on in the cadets she'd shaped and the officers now finding their voices. Tara's fight wasn't just for her or Caleb, it was for every soldier who'd ever been erased. As she tucked Caleb into bed that night, his dinosaur nightlight casting a soft glow, Tara felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The obstacle, Warwick's betrayal, had become the way, just as her father's marine wisdom promised. Her pain had forged a legacy, not of vengeance but of honor. Standing in her quiet kitchen, she realized the best revenge wasn't Warwick's fall. It was creating a space where his kind couldn't thrive. That was the victory that endured, the one that made her whole. The Kentucky hills stretched endlessly before Tara's home, their quiet beauty a stark contrast to the battles she'd fought. A year ago, she'd stood in a Georgia parking lot, her career in ashes, her son's name used as a weapon. Now, as Major Hensley, she led with integrity, her days filled with purpose and her evenings with Caleb's laughter. Her story wasn't just about surviving. It was about transforming pain into power, about proving that strength isn't the absence of fear but the courage to act through it. Tara's fight had changed the Army's culture, giving voice to the silenced, and that was her true triumph. She'd learned that obstacles don't just block the path, they carve it. As she watched Caleb sleep, Tara knew her journey was a beacon for others still in their battles. Your fight matters too. Never let anyone steal your light. If Tara's story moved you, drop a fire in the comments to share your moment of resolve, or a broken heart if you felt erased. Let's build a community of strength. Share one piece of wisdom from your own battles below. Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to know their fight is worth it. Thank you for being here. Let's keep telling stories that inspire.